You are standing in a crowded room. The air is thick with the rhythmic hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the warm golden glow of shared laughter. People are leaning into each other, their bodies mirroring one another in a silent dance of connection. But you are standing perfectly still. You are smiling, a practiced, polite curve of the lips, but your eyes are miles away. You feel like a ghost in high definition. You are physically there, taking up space, yet you have the overwhelming sensation that if you walked out the door right now, the air would simply close up. Behind you, leaving no trace that you ever existed. You aren't loud. You aren't disruptive. You have spent your entire life learning how to shrink, how to fold yourself into the corners of rooms, how to be low maintenance. You are the one who is always fine. You are the reliable one, the one who never demands attention, the one who watches the room instead of filling it. And if you look closely into a mirror, you might see the quiet sadness was staring back at you, the residue of a story that didn't start today. It started decades ago. In the very place that was supposed to feel safest, home. It started with a void, not of what was already done to you, but of what was never there. Today we are going into the dark architecture of childhood emotional neglect. We're exploring why your survival strategy of being fine is actually a slow erosion of the soul, how the absence of impact leaves the deepest scars, and how the ghost child within you can finally learn to be seen. When we talk about trauma, we usually talk about events. We talk about the things that happened, the shouting, the storms, the visible breaks. But emotional neglect is different. It is a phantom. It is defined not by the presence of a hit, but by the absence of a hug. It is the void of what didn't happen. Imagine a house where all the furniture is missing. You can walk through the rooms, the floorboards are sturdy, the roof doesn't leak, and the walls are painted, but it doesn't feel lived in. There is no warmth, no place to rest, no reflection of the person who lives there. That is the internal world of the emotionally neglected child. They grew up in a full house that was psychologically empty. Research in developmental psychology tells us that a child's brain is like a mirror. To understand who they are, they need to see themselves reflected in the eyes of their parents. When a child is excited and the parent mirrors that joy, the child learns my happiness is real. When a child is scared and the parent soothes them, the child learns my fear is manageable. This is called attunement. It is the biological process of a parent's nervous system co-regulating with the child's. But what happens when the mirror is blank? What happens when you cry and no one asks why? When you are proud of a drawing and it is met with a distracted, that's nice without a glance? When your parents are too busy, too depressed, or too emotionally stunted to see the person behind the child, the brain recalibrates. It performs a cold, logical survival calculation. It realizes that reaching out for connection results in a null response. And in the economy of a child's mind, a null response is more painful than a negative one. Negative attention is still attention. It confirms you exist. Neglect, however, whispers that you are invisible. To survive, the child develops a silent script. They learn to hold it all in. They learn that their emotions are either too much for their parents to handle or not enough to be noticed. So they stop feeling. They enter a state of functional freeze. By the time the ghost child reaches adulthood, their survival strategies have become their personality traits. They don't even realize they are wearing a mask because the mask has fused to their skin. There are three primary archetypes that emerge from the void of neglect. You might recognize yourself in one, or perhaps a blend of all three. First, there is the perfectionist. This child learned early on that they could only earn visibility through extreme achievement. If they were the best student, the fastest runner, or the most helpful, they might catch a fleeting glimpse of their parents' pride. As adults, these are the high achievers who are perpetually exhausted. They work 16-hour days, not out of passion, but out of a desperate underlying fear that if they stop producing, they will disappear. They are human doings, not human beings. Second, there is the invisible one. This child learned that safety lies in being unnoticed. If they didn't have needs, they wouldn't be a burden. If they didn't speak, they couldn't be dismissed. As adults, they are the ones who go with the flow until they have no direction of their own. They avoid conflict like it's a lethal poison. They say, it's fine when their heart is breaking. They have trained the world to overlook them, and then they wonder why they feel so profoundly lonely in their relationships. Third, there is the rebel. This child decided that negative attention was better than the void. They broke things, shouted, and defied rules just to force a reaction, to prove that they could still impact the world around them. As adults, they often sabotage their own success or push people away before they can be left. Their anger is just a very loud way of asking, do you see me now? The common thread between all three is avoidant validation behavior. You have spent so long convincing yourself that you don't need anyone that you have become a stranger to your own heart. You doubt your instincts. You suppress your joy because it feels too loud. You treat your own emotional needs as inconveniences to be managed rather than truths to be honored. There is a health cost to this silence. A landmark study showed that chronic loneliness, Tomi, the kind of soul-deep isolation felt by neglected children, can have the same physical impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It inflames the heart, weakens the immune system, and creates a lead vest sensation of depression. Your body is trying to speak the truths your mouth has been trained to hide. Emotional neglect doesn't just live in your memories. It is etched into your physiology. Because you weren't soothed as a child, your nervous system never learned how to come down from high alert. You might find that you have a hyper-aware gaze. You are constantly scanning the room for tone changes, micro-expressions, or shifts in the atmosphere. You have become an expert in reading silence. You know exactly when someone is mildly annoyed before they even know it themselves. This isn't intuition, it is a trauma response. It is the result of a child who had to become their own emotional weather station. Because the adults in the house were unpredictable or cold. You learn to step around conflict like broken glass. This leads to a physical shrinking. Look at your posture. Are your shoulders rolled forward? Is your breathing shallow? This is the ghost child trying to take up as little space as possible. You have literally tightened your muscles to make yourself a smaller target for disappointment. In relationships, this manifests as a disconnected independence. You might be the anchor for your partner, your friends, and your colleagues. You are the one everyone goes to. But who is the anchor for you? Often the answer is no one. You have built a fortress of self-reliance. But a fortress is also a prison. You feel unknown because you have never allowed anyone to see the house inside you. You fear that if people saw the emptiness, they would leave, not realizing that it is the emptiness itself keeping them distant. So, how do we fill a house that has been empty for decades? How does a ghost child become a person of flesh and blood? The first step is the most painful. You must stop blaming yourself for the void. For years, you concluded, it must be me. You took the absence of your parents' attunement and turned it into proof of your own defectiveness. Healing begins when you shift the question from, what is wrong with me, to what happened to me? Naming the neglect is like turning on a light in that empty house. It allows you to see the emptiness isn't a flaw. This is the process of reparenting. It sounds abstract, but it is deeply practical. It means becoming the attentive, loving parent to yourself that you never had. When you feel that familiar weight of exhaustion, instead of saying, get over it, you pause, you sit with yourself. You ask, what am I feeling? This is where you develop emotional literacy. If your feelings were dismissed, you never learned to name them. You have to start journaling, not as a chore, but as a way of giving that silenced inner child a voice. Write down the anger you weren't allowed to have. Write down the joy you were told was too much. You must also address the body. You have to teach your nervous system that it is safe to take up space. Practices like yoga, somatic breathwork, and standing with your arms wide open can rewire your brain. You are sending a signal to your amygdala. I am here, I am visible, I am safe. And finally, you must risk the thing you fear most, authentic connection. You need to find people who can hear you're not okay without trying to fix it. Who can look at your empty house and stay for tea anyway? The very sensitivity that made you feel unseen as a child is your greatest strength as an adult. Because you know what it feels like to be invisible, you have the rare power to truly see others. You are the one who notices the person in the corner. You are the one who senses the wound behind the smile. Your loneliness has become the soil out of which a profound compassion has grown. The lonely life of the child is heavy, but it is not a life sentence. It is a wound and it can heal. You were wired for connection. The fact that you felt the pain of its absence is proof that your heart is alive. You don't have to be fine anymore. You don't have to be a ghost. You are allowed to be loud. You are allowed to be needy, messy, and visible. Because the truest kind of celebration isn't balloons. It is the simple, radical act of choosing to be fully alive, exactly as you are. The ghost child is finally coming home, and this time they're bringing the furniture. Let's move into the harder but more liberating territory. What it really takes to heal. Because here's the truth. Loneliness may be the shadow, but it does not have to be your destiny. The fact that you are even listening, even curious about this shows something powerful. That a part of you still believes in connection, still longs for wholeness, still hopes, and that spark is enough. Let's begin with the most fundamental shift, moving from self-blame to self-standing. For many who grew up emotionally neglected, the default is self-criticism. Why can't I just be normal? Why do I feel so empty? Why do I mess up relationships? This self-blame is like an echo of childhood when the child assumed they were the problem. But healing begins when you stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking what happened to me. That question changes everything. It removes shame and replaces it with compassion. And compassion is the soil where true growth begins. Neglect deprives children of emotional literacy. If your feelings were dismissed or ignored, you never learned to name them or express them safely. That's why so many adults with this history struggle to even identify what they're feeling. One powerful practice is journaling, not as a chore, but as a way of giving your inner child a voice. When you sit down with pen and paper and simply ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? You are rebuilding a bridge to parts of yourself that were silenced. Feelings are information. Once you learn to listen, they can guide you toward the life you've always deserved. Another key step is cultivating relationships that validate you. For you, this can feel risky. Trust doesn't come easily. Vulnerability feels foreign. You may even fear being too much. But human beings are wired for connection, and healing rarely happens in isolation. Even one safe relationship, friend, partner, or therapist, can begin to repair the loneliness. Secure relationships in adulthood can rewire the brain, creating a sense of safety that was missing. Seek out people who listen without judgment, who honor your emotions instead of dismissing them. Because every time someone responds with care, it sends a powerful message. You matter. But what if those safe people feel hard to find? This is where reprinting enters. It simply means becoming the attentive parent to yourself that you never had. When you feel sad, instead of dismissing it, you pause and comfort yourself. When you feel joy, you let yourself fully celebrate instead of shutting it down. When you feel fear, you acknowledge it gently instead of shaming yourself for being weak. Over time, these small acts add up. They teach you that your needs are real and you are worthy. Healing isn't linear. Some days you feel more grounded. Other days you slip back into old patterns. This is normal. Remember, you are undoing decades of conditioning. Persistence matters. Each time you choose to feel instead of suppress, you are rewiring your inner world. It's also important to address the body. Emotional neglect lives in the physical form. Children learn to tighten muscles or shrink their posture to stay unnoticed. As adults, this shows up as chronic tension or physical illness. Mindful practices can release it. By reconnecting with your body, you reconnect with parts of yourself that were long ignored. Now let's return to loneliness. Believing disconnection was normal, but loneliness is a signal. It's your soul saying, I was meant for more than this. I was meant to be known. Reframe this way, it becomes a compass pointing you back toward connection. Sometimes the first step is learning to be fully present with yourself without shame. Stop being a stranger to yourself. Once you do, you are more open to authentic connection. Emotional neglect is not rare. Millions of adults carry its effects. You are not alone. Your story may be common, but it brings a hidden gift, rare and profound empathy. You become the person who notices when someone else feels unseen, the voice that understands. The lonely life of neglect can transform into a life of conscious, deep connection, moving from invisibility to presence. But it begins with a choice to listen inward. The choice to risk vulnerability and believe that you are worthy of being known. Repeated day after day, these choices dismantle the old patterns and replace them with self-trust. Your loneliness is not proof that something is wrong. It is proof that you are human. It is proof you were wired for connection. Even if your childhood denied it, you can create it now. Every step you take toward being seen, even by yourself, is a step out of the shadows. You are not destined to remain unknown. You are capable of building a life where you are heard. When your emotions are honored, you don't just heal yourself, you help heal the world. Choosing compassion over dismissal makes it easier for others to do the same. And that's how the cycle finally breaks. By choosing to be fully alive, exactly here and now.